Episode 78. 78 organs in the human body. Via Rail became its own entity in 1978, and Novak Djokovic has 78 wins in Arthur Ashe Stadium. Beyond MD, episode 78, here we go! Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond MD. So today we dive back into real estate investing, and we have a bit of a different approach to real estate investing today. We've covered a number of different topics on the podcast so far, like investing into single-family homes, into condos. We've discussed the BRRRR method. We've talked about private equity real estate investing. But today we're talking about investing into multifamily right in the heart of Toronto. So I'm going to be talking to Matthew Lee and Ming Lim, and they run Volition Properties, which is Toronto's leading real estate investment advisory and realty firm. So Matt and Ming and their team, they are investment experts in multifamily, luxury multiplex conversions, and laneway housing right in the heart of Toronto. Their investment philosophy is quite interesting. You can see that they focus on quality, and they have a few core tenets that they always adhere to when investing in the heart of Toronto. You'll see as the interview unfolds. And they talk about really how to use equity and use that equity to turn it into cash flow in the future. That part of the conversation was very, very interesting. So today's conversation is a bit of a different take on real estate investing. I really hope you do enjoy it. And just note that Volition Properties, they also hold the largest meetup for real estate investors in Toronto. They have one coming up next week, and the details will be in the show notes. So with that, please enjoy the interview. Okay, guys, really excited to have both of you on the show today. So I have Matt and Ming here, and guys, welcome to Beyond MD.
Thanks for having us.
It's real to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I have to start this off with a story because how this all started is a bit unusual. So I was taking a flight in March to West Palm Beach, and then Matt, I recognized you at the gate. And so I just kind of looked, and the moment I saw you, I just felt like there was something familiar there. And I said, "Is your name Matt Lee?" You said yes.
No.
I said, "Did you go to Albert College for high school?" And you said yes. And then I was just like, I couldn't believe it. Matt, I do want people to know though. So you were 2 or 3 years ahead of me, but just know, like, in my mind, and I think in the minds of many others, and again, I'm not going to inflate any egos here, Ming, but I have to say this. So Matt, I think, was regarded as the smartest person to walk the hallways of our school. And there were a lot of people who looked up to Matt, including myself. And then we started talking on the flight. We talked for like 3 hours straight. The flight landed, and the family behind me, the wife, she turned to me. She's just like, "What were you guys talking about?" She's like, "Because I've never talked to anybody that long in my life." She's like, "Were you guys talking shop? Were you guys talking business?" And I was just like, "What kind of, It was just really, really interesting conversation on real estate investing.
That's been 30 years. 30 years.
I know, it's unbelievable. So I'm really happy to do this. Really happy to line up this date. And I think, Matt, what you shared with me on that flight about how you and Ming think about real estate investing, maybe adding another layer to it, I found it really interesting. And that's, I guess, how this idea came up. So really excited to have you guys on today.
Yeah, I know. Excited to be on here. Excited to share what we've learned over the past little while investing in real estate.
Awesome. So maybe just talk to us a bit. Let's hear both your stories about how did you two get started with real estate investing, and then how was Volition Properties born?
So after university, I was working, climbed the corporate ladder. I went to Waterloo for systems design engineering after Albert College. After that, I worked in corporate for many years. And, I was a young professional, and then I thought, I'm climbing the corporate ladder, getting promotions, getting raises. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should buy a condo just like everyone else. Then I had a buddy. He's like, "Oh, you want to buy a condo? Why don't you do what I'm doing?" I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I bought a duplex." I was like, "What's a duplex?" I knew nothing at that point in time. He's like, "Oh, it's a house." I'm like, "Why would I want a house?" Like, I remember growing up, I have to cut lawn, shovel snow. My dad was always fixing stuff. I was like, "Why would I want a house?" He's like, "Oh, no, it's a split into 2 units. You can live in one and rent out the other." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. I didn't even know you could do that." And then, I worked in business at the time, so it was very easy for me to run the financials and the business models and business case. And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, wow, your cost of living is lower than mine, even though I'm renting." All you did was allocate some capital intelligently, and all of a sudden you get to better outcomes. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went looking for a duplex, and then I accidentally went and bought a fourplex. And then I lived in one unit, I rented out the other three, and something incredible happened. I was living for free. Actually, I was actually being paid to live. I was actually cash flow positive. And I thought, wow, I don't know what it is I stumbled upon, but this is powerful and I need to go figure this out. So I did something very rash. I quit my job and I just threw myself into understanding real estate and real estate investing. And then now, many years later, Ming and I run a company in which we educate and help investors invest in real estate. So yeah, that's how I got started.
That's awesome. Ming, what about yourself?
Yeah, it's really weird because me and Matt have similar stories. I also went to Waterloo on computer science side, and
But we didn't know each other.
we didn't know each other. Yeah, this whole time we didn't know each other. For years we didn't know each other, but we have similar origin stories. So I went to Waterloo. Hated computer science, by the way. It sucked the love out of computers for me, that course. But anyway, after I graduated, being a poor student, I guess poor new employee, I was my roommates were watching Oprah. Not me, my roommates. And I happened to walk by, and Robert Kiyosaki was on, and he had just written the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. So this is aging me a bit here, but that's what happened, right? And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. So I went to Chapters, and I read the book in the store because I didn't have money to buy it. Yeah, right. I read the book in the store, and I was like, wow, this is really amazing. It's really my first introduction to anything that was personal finance, because as you guys well know, they don't teach anything about personal finance in schools. Our parents don't grow up with personal finance education. And so it was mind-blowing, this whole concept of like multiple streams of income, and he talks about real estate in there. And I was like, wow, I've got to do this. And so I took my meager savings from my first job. I was working at Research in Motion back then, which became BlackBerry, which is now, I mean, they're still around, but they're not doing anything like this anymore. Took like a very small amount of money because back then I could do 5% down, and I was able to split that with my parents at the time, who thought it was a good idea as well. And I bought my first property, a student rental property in Waterloo. It was illegal. It was all wrong. But my agent at the time had no idea. But that's what got me started, and I got hooked on it, even though I had all sorts of problems, because it was the concept of having additional cash flow from a property was just, blew my early 20-somethings mind, right? Like, that's what got me hooked. And yeah, that's basically it for me.
Amazing. Now, maybe you guys can talk a bit about your business model. How does Volition work? Because from what I understand, a lot of your investing happens in Toronto proper. Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, actually, well, the funny thing is, so Ming and I created this company because we had similar values. We wanted to share what we've learned and our experiences to help others achieve that kind of financial freedom in the context of real estate, because we understood that real estate was a powerful vehicle. And so we are one of the only real estate teams, investor realtor teams in Toronto. So, I mean, that's a concept that's foreign to most people. What's an investor realtor, right? Like most people are going to use the realtor to help them buy their first condo, or help them buy their family home or something like that. And the reality is that is going to lead you astray. And so what you want to be looking for is an investor-focused realtor. And so we are an investor-focused realty team that, yes, focuses in Toronto. And so one of the things that we also do is we offer advisory and coaching services to help investors try to figure out the whole journey as well, right? So yeah,
let me jump in for 1 second. I think one of the things that differs, and I think it's important to highlight this, is a lot of times especially medical professionals, they're being sold products all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like invest in this product, invest in that product, right? We are not selling a product. We're just helping people buy an investment property, right? So we're not running a fund. We're not, trying to find a JV partner. We just want to help people buy quality investment properties, which fit the lives of our clientele, which tend to be quite busy, right? That's a big difference, and I just wanted to.
Yeah, so we're not a REIT, we're not a private equity firm. We're a real estate investment firm with advisory and realty services. Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Now,
yeah.
Now, talk to us about multifamily, because we live in a house, and some people will invest in single family homes, and then people talk about investing in condos. We've had both of these concepts on the show already. We've had a little bit on multifamily, but talk to us. I guess I want to know the investment thesis behind multifamily, especially in Toronto, because I've talked to people about condos, and some people say, have you lived in a condo for an extended period of time? Like, it could be quite suffocating. Like, it's pretty small. But whereas I feel single family homes may be out of reach for some, but then multifamily, I guess you're really onto something there. But what is the demand and investment thesis for multifamily in Toronto proper?
Funny enough, I recorded a YouTube video just on this about 2 weeks ago. Like, why you should never invest in a condo, I think was the title of it. And primarily it's talking about. Let me take a step back. It's not that you should never invest in a condo. There are times and places when you should, but usually the criteria for a successful condo investment, because we hold quite a high bar, that criteria is almost never met. So in the last 5 years, working with our clients, we've only come across one condo investment that made sense. So why is this? One, and the big thing for us is you're not cash flowing on these properties, right? At 20% down, you're often having to have a major substitution onto this property to make it cash flow neutral, where you're either putting a ton of equity in to achieve that, or you're substituting on a monthly basis, right, on this cash flow negativity. So that's one. And why does that matter? When you're looking at scale, sure, it's fine if one property is negative $500 a month, but no business. You should be thinking about real estate investing as a business, and no business relies on just one client, one customer, right? Would you want to actually 10x this kind of portfolio? Would you want 10 times the amount of negative cash flow? Would a bank want to lend you money? As you grow, you lose more and more money, right? It's not a good business. It's fundamentally a broken business model. So that's number one. It's a big one. Number two, the rate of appreciation in condos is 1% to 2% less overall than single family or multifamily.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and part of it comes from, you can easily just pop up another condo, and there you go, another 200, 500 units. Versus single family, you have space restrictions, or you have land restrictions. You just can't do that. So single family prices and condo prices have been diverging more and more over the years because the value increase is not in the building itself, it's in the land, right? And if you have fractional ownership of land, you're going to get fractional gains. And that 1% to 2% doesn't sound like very much, but over time, you're well-educated audience here, 1 or 2% is hundreds of thousands of dollars when you're talking about, 10, 15, 20 years in your investment horizon. So, for me, those are really the two biggest points. There's all sorts of other stuff. I could kind of go on and on, but that's why we very much preach a multifamily approach to investing versus a condo approach.
Well, the whole reason that we jump into multifamily is because, as you probably know, it's impossible to achieve anywhere close to neutral cash flow with a single family in Toronto, right? And so years ago, it was possible. You could buy, a single family, a townhouse, a semi, whatever. You could cash flow. But as the economics have changed, and as Toronto has become more expensive and rent has not increased in lockstep, what happens then is that you've had to evolve with the market. And so it's not static. You can't keep on investing in the exact same thing over and over again. As the market dynamics change, you need to be able to be nimble and be flexible. And so we've had to get 2 units under one roof, 3 units under one roof, 4 units under one roof, 4 units, and then one out the back, which I think we might elaborate on a little bit later. But the point being is that this is part of the reason. So like we come across a lot of different types of investors, but there's 2 main types that we see. One is the type of person who banks solely on appreciation without any regard to cash flow or even trying to get to neutral cash flow. Those are people who like buy a bungalow in Willowdale and then, they buy it for 1.5 million now and hope that it's worth 2.5 million in 5 years from now or something like that. And meanwhile, they're cash flow negative thousands of dollars. And then, a condo is similar in that vein. The other type of investor we come across are people who are solely focused on cash flow, and what we think is solely focused on cash flow to the detriment of all else. And then what happens there is it leads to other problems in other business models, introducing elements of risk and headache. And so we believe here in Toronto, we believe in a risk mitigated and headache mitigated approach. And we believe that Toronto offers risk mitigation because we've identified the biggest risk to your investment business in Ontario. And the biggest risk, bar none, are tenants. Tenants are the biggest risk to your business. It's not, most people think it's, interest rates, or is there a bubble, or, all the other stuff. It's actually, if you boil it down and you go back to first principles, you'll understand tenants are the biggest risk to your business. And so what we want to do is cater to the best tenant profile possible. And so we've identified that as young millennials, professional millennials, university educated. I'm going to add Zennials in there too, Gen Zs. I'm dating myself now. But the young professionals who are university educated, 2 to 5 years out of school, working at a big firm in downtown Toronto, making about 60, 80K. Right? Like that's our tenant profile. So instead of doing what most people do is they'll like buy a property and hope for the best, or they might buy in much, much smaller city centers chasing cash flow because it's much cheaper. They think buying cheaper mitigates risk. Buying cheap doesn't mitigate risk. Buying smart mitigates risk.
That is so interesting. So I listened to you guys on another show as well, and just hearing what you said, Matt, I'm trying to paint an analogy here. For me, a lot of real estate investment and a lot of teaching in real estate investment has traditionally focused on cash flow.
Yes.
Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow.
Yes.
But it seems like to me, your approach is a little bit different. Like to me, if I can just paint an analogy to investing in the stock markets, I feel like the way you guys invest is probably more akin to investing in a good quality company that just like compounds over time. And you're looking for, okay, you may get some dividends along the way, but you're not chasing like the high yielder. You guys invest in those more high quality compounders. That's at least what I'm getting. But I want to ask you quickly before I go on to tenants, the location of Toronto and cash flow. Do you guys traditionally buy single family homes and then convert them into multifamily, or are you investing in more turnkey multifamily? Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I think it really depends on our clients' investment objectives, right? One of the things that we pride ourselves on is like, if you come to us and you're like, hey, I'm looking to invest in real estate, I would think your average Joe realtor goes, great, let me take you to a condo, right? We have an advisory arm, which Matt runs, and we take a holistic approach. We'll work with your private wealth planners. We'll work with, your accountants to understand what your structure is, to then figure out what the right investment is. We also want to leverage your skills and strengths. So if you have the ability to do construction or have the knowledge, intestinal fortitude to go through it, then we will absolutely try to leverage that, because you can get to better outcomes if you're willing to do some more work, right, through sweat equity. But So that doesn't. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but it will really depend. We do both something that's turnkey as well as something that's created.
All of the above. Yeah.
And are you guys investing in multifamily that is even in areas like North York, Scarborough, or Etobicoke, or is it more central Toronto?
That's a good question. So back to our investment philosophy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people will buy an investment property and then try to find a tenant to fit it, right? They'll buy an investment property because they look at the numbers and they'll be like, okay, great. Now find me the best tenant. And that's the wrong way to look at things, right? You should be looking for your ideal tenant profile first, highly paid, 2 to 5 years out of school. Like we can go run through that tenant profile, but basically where do they want to live, right? Based on where they want to live, let's invest in those areas. Right. So we know through our experience, things like public transit become very important for this demographic. Right. They don't drive. If they do, they're in the backseat of an Uber. Right. So access to public transit, no more than about 30 to 35 minutes into the downtown core. These things are really important. So because we're looking at tenant first, we tend not to end up in places like North York's, Etobicoke's, Scarborough's, right?
And it's really, again, it's really understanding our customer first and understanding them very thoroughly. So, think about, if I'm going to build a business, it's going to be customer centric. I'm going to try to understand my customers' needs and then build a product or service that meets their needs, not just build it and hopefully they'll come, right? This isn't field of dreams here. So what we want to do is approach this from a very much a business mindset, which means understanding that tenant profile. Our customers are our tenants, and work, live, and play is really important to them. So they want to live where they work and they want to play where they live. And so no longer are this new generation of millennials and Gen Zs, white picket fences and living in the burbs and hour and 20-minute commute to work in the downtown core because that's where their job is most likely going to be. White collar professional type of job. They don't want that. They don't want the same thing as our boomer parent. Oh, I guess. My boomer parents, I guess.
My boomer parents. No, it's all good.
But they don't want those same things anymore, right? And so what that really leads to is the conclusion is inevitable. They want to be in the downtown core. That's where the cool coffee shops and the funky galleries and the museums and the bars and lounges and the shows. That's where it's happening. It's not that stuff isn't happening out in the burbs, right? And so, and then what we're finding also is because they want to live there as a 20-something, when they become they're 30 something and they start, maybe partnering up, having a family, they don't necessarily want to live, far away either because they like that lifestyle. And so that's where the neighborhoods adjacent to the downtown core become really, really important. So that's the Annex and Little Italy and Trinity Bellwoods and the Leslievilles and the Riverdales and the East Yorks and so on and so forth. Right. And so that's what actually leads us to the city center and the neighborhoods adjacent to the city center core. And we've mapped this all out. There's 156 neighborhoods in Toronto, and we've mapped them all out, and we know exactly where they want to be. And so we have an investment heat map on essentially.
Wow.
That narrows that down for our clients.
That is fascinating. I just want to really nail down this topic of tenants. So these are professionals or people who are advancing in their life. These are people who are going to pay rent. I'm guessing these are people who are probably going to be more likely to take care of a property.
Yes.
Now, and they're probably not going to be renting for too long. How does that fit into your investment thesis as well?
That's exactly it. Yeah, you very nicely summarized it. And so one of the questions that comes up often is, why don't I want a tenant who's going to stay there forever, right? Why don't I want a, established person? Why are we going after this younger demographic? So it's because we've created our risk mitigation and our risk framework based on the environment we're operating in, right? We're in Ontario. We're in a rent-controlled environment. the only way we don't believe in like rent evictions or any of this kind of stuff. And the only way we can really bring it back up to market rents is through natural attrition. I mean, think back to when you were in your early 20s, right?
Mhm.
You're just naturally moving around a lot more. You have roommates, you have girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it happens to be, but your life is a lot more dynamic then. So your likelihood of sticking around for 10, 15 years is just a lot less.
Yep.
Because we do want natural turnover in this tenant profile so we can bring our rents back up to market.
That makes sense. I can tell you the last time I bought a property, it was in the fall of 2022. And I can tell you that purchase basically occurred on a spreadsheet. Like nowhere in that conversation was, well, what are my tenants going to be like? And am I going to run into any issues there? Are there going to be risks there? So I think what you're hitting on is crucial, probably under discussed in Ontario. Before I forget, opportunities right now in Toronto proper, multifamily. I know that things were trending downwards, maybe price-wise, like late 2022, maybe into 2023. Maybe a good time to buy then, but are you still finding appealing opportunities right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so what's been, I guess the reason I'm so excited. Is
Yeah.
because-
You look excited. Yeah.
Yeah, it's contrary to I think what a lot of people believe, and this is what I love about our investment community. So, once you become a client of ours, you join what we call our inner circle, just a fancy name for a big WhatsApp chat group. But it is a more sophisticated group of individuals, right? And a lot of them took action through late 2023 up until now when interest rates were high, because properties actually still made sense. In the investment world, there's cap rate, right? Capitalization rate. It's basically a calculation of the return on a property, right? And that has risen in Toronto as interest rates rose. So prices were being pushed down, especially for these dedicated, triplexes, fourplexes, multifamily properties. If a seller needs to sell, they are going to have to reduce their price because interest rates are higher. And that is exactly what happened. So we had a couple of clients purchase properties, which at the time, because interest rates were very high, like kind of in the 6%-ish range,
Yeah.
they were just barely cash flow neutral. Some of them losing a little bit, like $100 or $200 a month. But they had the foresight, like I said, being more sophisticated, to know that this high interest rate environment wouldn't last forever. Right. And this is what we were telling people. Like, this is an opportunity to get property at a low price and good property too. Like, you're not relegated to the corners of Toronto. You're buying in primo neighborhoods like the Little Italy, like Annex, stuff like this, getting good quality property. And then when interest rates come down, you're going to be cash flow positive. So just a quick example, we had a client purchase end of last year, November of last year, in the Ossington neighborhood. He was negative cash flow about $200 on that property at the time with his mortgage.
Yeah.
Now, just less than a year later, he's gone from negative 200 to positive $900 a month.
Wow.
And that's just from the interest rates coming down. So, we're blessed to have a community that looks a little bit deeper. But most people aren't. Most people, unfortunately, just look at what's in front of them and assume that this is the operating environment that they will always be in.
It's totally the Warren Buffett saying, right? Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. And that was the environment. Like, everyone was crapping their pants. And we were finding properties that were traditionally, about 1.7. People were acquiring for about 1.5. Rents hadn't changed. Rents hadn't necessarily dipped or anything. So, I mean, think about what that does for your cap rate. So your cap rates in Toronto were historically about 4.25, and they were going up to 5, 5.25, 5.5. Like, it was insane. And people who had that sort of foresight saw that this was an opportunity, and they're really reaping the rewards now.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know that the annual Physicians Financial Wellness Conference is being held this upcoming November 2nd, happening virtually in the afternoon. It's being hosted by Dr. Steph Zhao, and it will feature presentations by keynote speaker Benjamin Tal, economist from CIBC, and it will also have a live recording of the Money Scope podcast with Dr. Mark Soth and Benjamin Felix. All great presenters. I think this is a great effort by Steph. And as you guys know, all proceeds for the conference go towards the Equity Award. I have a link in the show notes if you wish to register and check it out. Now back to the episode. What about somebody may come back with an argument and say, well, okay, we recognize that prices were dipping in Toronto and some of these good areas, but what about investing in an area that is not in the outskirts, but maybe has a little bit more of a ways to go in terms of development, maybe is a little bit more seedy. Some people would say that area may have the opportunity for even more price escalation compared to some of these more established areas. What are your thoughts on that?
They're not incorrect, right? But that's, in our minds, a crystal ball exercise, right? So I'll give you a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Eglinton West, not a seedy neighborhood, but certainly not as developed and very close to like beautiful, like Forest Hill and stuff like that, like beautiful neighborhoods in the city. But why haven't prices there risen? You could have bought it 10 years ago saying, hey, this subway is coming through. All the signs of gentrification are there. But if you did buy 10 years ago, you'd be a little disappointed now in terms of how much your property values have gone up. Gentrification is a bit of an S-curve, right? It's very, very slow. Then it hits this escalation point. Mm-hmm. Your $7 independent latte store opens up and you start to see the neighborhood change. We prefer to buy as that's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's a little more sure. Go back to your point. We're not buying startups. We're investing more in a blue chip type of stock. So we prefer to see the gentrification happening in the neighborhood. When we start to see that happen, that's the time for us to get it.
Gotcha.
Right? Eglinton West, in that example, we may be starting to see that, but 10 years ago, it certainly wasn't there. And who knows how long that takes. That's the hard part in all of this.
Okay.
And the funny thing is we've actually mapped this out, like on that investment heat map, on Google Maps that's accessible to our clients. Red areas, hot A-class neighborhoods, and then we have the B-class neighborhoods as well. And we're not saying don't invest there. We just want to make sure that clients understand what they're getting themselves into. So when you start moving into those blue coded areas, B plus, B minus type of areas, you need to know that the associated tenant profile in those areas are also B minus tenant profiles instead of the A plus. And it comes back to our, investment thesis of, blue chip and risk mitigation. Risk mitigation for us is above all else. And because we understand the mechanisms through which you build wealth in real estate. It's being able to hold over the long term in a strong, stable, growing city with a growing economy, diverse economy, that isn't a one-trick pony type of industry in that town. And you just really need to be able to hold over the long term and let real estate do its thing. And so we just want quality assets that we can hold over the long term that allow us to scale in a risk mitigated and headache mitigated way. And then real estate does its thing. That's it.
Matt, I love how you describe it as this investment heat map. Like the way you said it, like I so want to see this thing, right? It just sounds so enticing, so exciting. So I want to nail down your strategy on the more medium to long term now, because on that flight to Florida, Matt, the way you described it was amazing.
It took 3 hours though to explain.
Yeah, it took you through. So what, from what I understand, is that you accumulate a certain number of properties. Today, they may not generate meaningful cash flow, but I guess the way you described it was you hold them for a certain period of time, and there was kind of this magic period of time, and then you could actually begin to maybe sell one property, sell two properties, maybe start to pay down some of the other ones for more meaningful cash flow. But I would like you to describe this strategy over the medium to long term, because I don't think that anybody had talked to me about real estate in that way before.
Before Matt dives into this, I just want to mention one thing, because I think this is relevant to our view on cash flow.
Mhm.
I have a real estate investment mentor, and the first time I'd found this great cash flowing property was in Waterloo, a student rental property. And, the area is kind of cash flowing about $200-$300 for this particular type of property. But I had found one that was like $500 bucks a month, like, almost double the amount of cash flow. And I was super proud of this. I took it to my mentor and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, look at me, look at the job I've done here. And he goes, awesome. So you're going to retire now? You got another $200 a month. Great. What are you going to do with that? And he starts hammering me. He's like, what about what's happening with gentrification? What's the population growth in there? What's happening with infrastructure? And I'm like, and I had no idea how to answer those things back. And that has really played a part in how we look at cash flow, because it actually, he's right. It doesn't make a difference. You can go from $200 to $1,000 a month in cash flow. We're not retiring, unfortunately, on $1,000 a month. Right. So anyway, I'll let Matt get into that, but that's kind of the overlay when we look at cash.
Let me just riff off of what he was saying. So, I mean, the way that you have to understand the role of cash flow in real estate. Most people, again, what Ming was saying, most people will chase that extra $200 or $500 or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, look at me, I'm smarter than everyone else. I found a $500 positive cash flow property. But the reality is, cash flow is an illusion in the beginning. Cash flow is largely an illusion. And the reason is because a lot of that cash flow goes back into the property. It goes in because of vacancy. It goes in because of maintenance repair. It goes in because of XYZ issues, right? And so cash flow doesn't do much for you personally in the beginning.
I agree.
Cash flow matters very little in the beginning. It matters a lot at the end. And so this is what I was going to get into. I'm assuming you can see my screen.
Yeah. I can't I don't even know how to share things on my podcasting platform, but yet you found a way to do it. I'm impressed.
To be fair, I joined a little bit early, and I was like, "Where's the screen share?" Because I had an idea that I wanted to share this.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see this thing. Yeah.
So this is what you were This is what you were referring to, and I'm not sure whether I showed you this on our flight or not. Or
no, you didn't.
Okay, so this is the visual, because I figured a picture is worth 1,000 words. So it would take me 1,000 words to describe this, or I could just show you. But the idea here is that you buy one property, and so let's just say you buy this property for $1.5 million. You have a mortgage of $1.2 million, right? So you put a $300,000 down payment down. It makes about $7,500 in rent, and let's say that expenses are about $1,100. And then after you factor in the mortgage, you're zero cash flow. Most people would be like, "Oh, that's a crappy property. Like, what the hell? Why would I buy this? Doesn't make any sense." Let me show you why this makes sense, right? Because if you're buying in a good city with good growth prospects, the appreciation will occur eventually. It's not going to be, nice straight line appreciation. It's going to go up and down, but over the course of time, it should appreciate. So if you think about it, the Canadian average over the past 40 years has been about 5.4%. Toronto houses, single family residential, has appreciated about 10%. So it's outpaced. Toronto condos have, over the long term, have been about 7%. So generally speaking, we think that, again, coming back to what we talked about with Ming, buying land is really the opportunity here. And because we can densify and lots of other reasons, right? But the idea here is that if we could achieve just 5% growth, which is less than the Canadian average, actually, and in Toronto, we are pretty confident that we can achieve at least 5% over the long term.
Okay.
Right? In 4 years, you would have built enough equity through appreciation and through mortgage paydown that you could refinance, do an equity takeout, and use those proceeds to go invest in another property.
Okay.
So what we have now is, in about 4 years, you turn one property into two.
Gotcha.
And
Yep.
in another 4 years, you can tune 2 to 4, 4 to 8. The only thing here is mortgage qualification notwithstanding, right?
Right.
I know
Right.
this is a theoretical framework. Any one particular person's plan is going to differ, right,
Yep.
based on the situation. But you have a pretty well-heeled audience here. So your audience here could probably follow at least some semblance of this and grow their portfolio through more because of their high earning potential
Yeah.
and more qualification, right? So the idea here is you go 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8. Imagine you're in year 12 here, and then now I've got 8 of these properties. There's a couple options. I could wait 30 years and wait for them all to be paid off, or I could do something else. If I waited just 6 years, waited in the hold phase. So in the beginning, that was the acquisition phase. I'm being aggressive. I'm buying. The property's appreciating. I'm refinancing, and I'm buying more. Maybe I don't need to buy anymore at year 12. Maybe I just wait. How long do I wait? Maybe I wait 6 years. Why 6 years? What do you think happens in 6 years?
Well, I'm thinking back to what we discussed. So after 6 years, I guess you built up probably enough equity in the homes. You've paid down enough that you probably reach some kind of critical level now.
Some critical point, right?
Yeah.
Some event horizon. And again, this is just one possible solution. There's a multitude of solutions, but one possible easy to understand solution is you reach 50% loan to value, right? Because the properties are continuing to appreciate and you pay down some of the mortgage, and now you've reached 50% loan to value across your entire portfolio. If I reach 50% loan to value across my entire portfolio, 8 properties, I could sell off half, pay off the mortgage the other half, and now I've got massive cash flow.
Yeah.
Massive cash flow at year 18, right? So I'm no longer, this is an alternative strategy to most people who are just going to buy one property, wait 30 years for the thing to be paid off, and then, wait for that cash flow. This is an alternative. It's a way to do it faster, stronger, and better, just like Daft Punk, right? And
so through your strategy here, you've essentially completely paid off 4 high quality properties by year 18 in good areas with good tenants. And now you have massive cash flow at year 18 and you've got 4 properties. 4 properties that on day 1 would have cost $1.5 million. I understand these are the price ranges that you guys go for triplexes and fourplexes, but you've got 4 properties now.
And each of those properties are now worth at 5% growth over the course of 18 years. They went from 1.5 million to 3.6 million. But that's not it. Rents have also gone up. So if I just project 3% rent growth, that $7,500 in rent is now $13,000 in rent. And then also let's be realistic. Let's inflate our expenses too. So our expenses started at $1,100, and you grow it at 3%. You're probably at close to 2,000, like 1,900. Let's say 2,000.
Okay.
You go $13,000 in rent minus $2,000 of expenses. No mortgage. Now you're left with $11,000 of positive cash flow per property times 4 properties times 12 months. This is a path to $500,000 plus cash flow a year.
In terms of the 5% increase in price per year over the long term, maybe this is somewhat myopic of me, but in the last 2 years where things have kind of stagnated, I know it's just a point in time. Do you still feel comfortable like 5% over the long haul, accounting for windows like this where things may not go anywhere for a couple of years?
Interestingly enough, this model works regardless of the appreciation rate. It just might take a little longer, right? So again, if you understand the mechanisms through which you build wealth in real estate, you'll realize, okay, I'm appreciating, maybe model it at 3%, and you're still going to be paying down the mortgage. So basically, this is what happens over time. The original delta is your down payment, your equity, and your equity just grows over time. So it's just time. You let time do its thing. So even if it's a 2.5% rent growth, or even if it's zero growth, you still build equity over time. Even if it's negative, you still build equity over time. It's just going to take a lot longer to get to your goals, but your goals, reaching them is inevitable if you're able to hold the property over the long term.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Now, in today's market, maybe you can go over a couple of examples of maybe like a recent deal on multifamily in Toronto proper in a good neighborhood. How many units? What did that cost? Just to give people a sense of what some of the numbers might look like.
Yeah, I can go back to that property that we're talking about briefly in Ossington. So that property there, it's a fourplex, cost 1.6. So with 20% down, kind of all your closing costs, you're looking about 300, high 300s, let's say, to close on that property. Now, it was already tenanted. So you were asking earlier, do we go for properties that are vacant, tenanted, or do we create these units? It depends. In this case, our client, he's a business owner, so he's quite busy. They're opening a new branch in Toronto, so he's quite packed. So we went for something that was more turnkey. This was renting out total rents about $8,600, right? In total rents, $8,642 if you want to be exact. So that was rents plus this place had a garage at the back, which was rented out separately, had a little bit of additional income there. So then in terms of expenses, when we add all up property taxes, insurance, utilities, we're looking at about $1,256 on that property. And at the time of acquisition, mortgage rates were high. This is November 2023. Late November 2023. So about 6%. That's what the mortgage was. So amortized over 30 years, mortgage payments $76.74. So it's pretty high. And so he nets out slightly negative at $288 a month. Right? That's where he ends up sitting. And so, why do that? Because great location, great tenant profiles, and the knowledge nobody knew for sure, but we knew eventually interest rates would start to come down. And so less than a year later, now that we rerun his numbers, his mortgage is now sitting at, everything else has stayed the same. His rents have gone up a little, but, let's assume that it was the same tenants that stayed there the whole time. But now he's sitting at $900 a month, positive cash flow at a 4.5% interest rate. And that's just for over a 1 year period.
Holy smoke. So, and that's just because the mortgage payments have now gone down? Okay.
That's right. Mortgage payments have come down. So, as he continues to hold this, his investment will continue to improve in terms of its return. If I just take a snapshot in time right now and assume that he's going to continue to pay 4.5% on his mortgage, his rents don't, his rents go up at, let's say 4%, inflation's at 4%, and we hold that 5% appreciation on the property, his total ROI now over a 5-year period is 33.9%, just shy of 34%.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Matt, the diagram that you explained about acquiring properties, building up equity, acquiring more properties, and then selling off half eventually, how many properties does one realistically need to make it work? I know that this depends on what someone's individual needs are going to be, but let's say somebody has, a smaller goal, maybe like even just $100,000 of extra cash flow. Like, to reach meaningful cash flow, even smaller amounts, how many properties does one need?
Well, if we just take a look at that model again, that's just a model. It's no one particular person's plan, but the concept is still the same. The concept is the multiplier effects, right? So that's why we patented that multiplier effect, because it's such a powerful concept. And so if we follow that same model, imagine you buy one property today, right? At 1.5, 1.6 million, right? Let's just say that in 4 years, you grow your portfolio to 2 properties. And imagine that you have a couple options at that point. You could just wait and get to 50% loan to value from those 2 properties, or you could double up again and go to 4 properties. And then the 4 properties coming back down, if you got to 4 and you came back down to 2 properties by getting 50% loan value, selling off 2, paying off the mortgage the other 2, that means that you could do this entire, you could reach the end with just 2 properties, and each of those properties would be worth a little bit less than what I showed you on that screen. Because that whole time frame is 4 years for the first iteration, go 1 to 2, 4 years to go from 2 to 4, and then 6 years. So that means a total of 14 years instead of 18 years. But you'd be left with 2 properties that were each giving you about about $10,000 positive cash flow, times 12, 120 times 2, which is 240.
Okay, so very possible
years, right?
with 4 properties in total coming down to 2 then.
Then you could also go just 2 down to 1 and then cut out an entire iteration as well. It depends on how fast you want to do it. Time is the biggest factor here. If you can wait longer, it's no different than investing in stocks, right?
Totally.
You can wait longer, you can get to bigger outcomes, but you might not need that.
Ming, I wanted to ask you a question about that 4-plex in Ossington. You said the purchase price was, I believe, $1.6 million. 4 units. How big are these units? I'm just trying to wrap my head around price per square foot. And I know that that's just one metric, but I'm just trying to make a comparison to condos, for example.
Yeah. So it's a great question. What we ideally go for are 2-bedroom units to 3-bedroom units. Okay. Right? There's a lot of reasons we do this. I'll touch really quickly on some of them, though. One is flexibility in tenant profiles. So the 2-bedroom unit, you can get, 2 friends. You can get a couple who's looking for also workspace. You can get, one rich person who wants more space. But you have flexibility in the types of tenant profiles you're renting out to, therefore making it easier for you to hit higher rents as well. 3 bedrooms also can do that, but once we start getting past 3 bedrooms, it's diminishing returns. 1 bedrooms, there's too much, I shouldn't say there's too much, but there's a lot of condo competition in the 1-bedroom market, right? And you're limited on tenant profiles. So there's less people I can rent to, plus I have more competition. So we prefer those 2-bedroom units. Okay. Sizing of them, we're looking, kind of the bigger the better here. We don't really want to go much lower than about 750, 800 kind of on a 2-bedroom. Our advantage here is we're not a condo, right? You don't have to wait for your elevator to go to your unit. You can walk up to your unit very easily. We've got more space. You've got access to, a backyard, a neighborhood, right? There's always be a demographic who doesn't want to live in that box in the sky. And that's who we're going after. And these homes are bigger than condos, so we can offer that as well.
So if I take that example, a 4-plex, each being at around 800 square feet.
This was closer to about 1,000 per square foot.
Holy smoke. So you're looking at 4,000 square feet in total? You're looking at well under $500 a square foot?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Okay. Wow. Now, I want to hit on one last point as we kind of wrap up. You guys talked about the value of land. And I know you guys have talked about laneway suites before. Maybe you guys can just give us a quick primer. What is a laneway suite? What are some of the rules and regulations around this in Toronto? Just some key considerations for listeners.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to dive into that.
Yeah.
So laneway suites, aka coach houses, aka garden suites, these are essentially secondary units, secondary homes on a single piece of land that's at the back, right? A laneway suite just abuts onto a laneway. So these have to be legal laneways, not shared right away or anything like that. So city recognized laneways, they sit at the back of the property. or garden suites, same idea. They sit at the back of the property. There's a bunch of restrictions as to how big, how tall, how wide you can build laneways. So, without diving into all of those, but you have to account for the size of land, trees that may be there.
Mm-hmm.
You have to allow for light to come into your backyard. So that's basically what a laneway suite is. Now, I think what's more interesting for your audience is like, why are they interesting as an investment vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So primarily, a laneway suite itself, some high level numbers. Let's say you're looking at about 500 to 600,000 to build one of these.
Yeah.
Right. Depending on the area you're in, that will allow you to build up to a 3-bedroom laneway suite.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, those are renting out anywhere from about low 4,000s to low 5,000s. Now you contrast that to a condo. Right, spend $600,000 on a condo. There's no way you're getting $4,000 a month in rent on a condo. So in terms of a adder onto a property to increase your rents and increase the return on a property, it's very good, and that's why a lot of our clients are looking to laneway suites to add on to their investment properties.
And in a place like Toronto, where cash flow is very, very difficult to obtain, it's a massive cash flow booster.
It is because from these numbers, so let's say you put in $500,000 to make one, at least 3 bedrooms, $4,000 of rent per month, then you are approaching $50,000 of rent per year. So essentially like the 10% rule, right?
10% rule.
Yeah, which is like unheard of now, right? So
in Toronto, that's
no. So
impossible.
are clients of yours actively doing this, and are they getting the right appraisals? Like, is this process succeeding? Like in as things stand today?
So let's define succeeding, not to avoid the question, but so are they actively doing it? Absolutely. We have a lot of clients who are building laneway suites, garden suites, because the numbers are fantastic. So yes to that. Are they successful in it? Yes, because they have been built and they are renting out. These numbers are coming directly actually from our clients. But your next question about refinancing, we're not quite there yet. We're still in early days, and because it's, banks are conservative when they're going through their appraisal process. Remember, this is still a home, so they're not appraising it strictly as if this was a multifamily residence of 10, 20 units. So they're not using commercial methods for appraisal. They're still using, for the most part, comparables. And there's not a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like literally in the city, when it comes to properties that have transacted with laneways, even though they've now been around for about 5 years, it's a handful. Like there's maybe 20 properties in total in the entire city that have transacted with laneway suites, because people, they're building them, but they're not selling them, right? They tend to rent them out, or they're for their, their family or something like that. So there's not enough data. Not to say that the banks aren't getting there. We already know that they're working on programs to try to figure out how to refinance, pull the equity out of a laneway suite. But, it's not at that point yet.
Let me just add on.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that this is so attractive now is because 5 to 6 years ago, the city changed legislation, bylaws, to allow laneway suites to be built very, very easily now. It used to be a very expensive, long, and arduous process. You'd have to go to get approvals from all these different places. It would cost a lot of money. Now you can go basically get your plans drawn up, go get a permit. And so that is now like a 4 to 6 month process just to get permits rather than 3 years.
Okay, so it sounds like this is now becoming a much easier process today then. And so far, it sounds like the people that you're working with, clients, they're not having too much of an issue getting permits and getting this process started. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's very easy because basically, as much as the city of Toronto gets knocked for its policies, when it comes to small development, they really are at the cutting edge. They've made it clearly defined what you need to do to build a laneway, and they made it what's called as of right, which means you can't have a neighbor stop you. You're allowed to build this. You're allowed to build it as of right.
Guys, if people wanted to learn more about the work you're doing, Volition Property, How do they get a hold of you guys? How do they learn about what you're doing?
Yeah, there's many ways. We'll leave links with you, but we just launched a new YouTube
Oh,
channel
congrats.
about a month
Congratulations.
ago.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's very difficult. We were chatting a bit about YouTube before. It is much more work than I think we bargained for, but it's a great forum for us to be able to put our thoughts
Yeah.
down in a more
Yeah.
concise manner and let people get to know us. So it's just Volition Properties on YouTube if you search for that. We're also on Instagram, Volition Properties, and you can find us everywhere else. LinkedIn, Facebook. Our website is volitionprop.com. And you can always email us as well at info@volitionprop.com. It'll make its way to us, and happy to connect.
And we also run the largest real estate investment meetup group in Toronto. We hold a monthly meetup every month, and we bring in, we speak, we give updates on the market.
Yeah.
We advise, we introduce new strategies for investment. Some of our clients are doing condominiumization right now as well. So, for example, they're building walk-up condos out of these single-family homes. So they're basically similar process, building triplexes, fourplexes, plus laneways, but they're condominiumizing and then selling them off. So there's to try to help address the missing middle piece in Toronto, and affordability and ownership. So anyway, we bring in expert speakers. We let other investors come and share their experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly. So yeah, our monthly meetup. We're the largest in Toronto and the second largest in Canada. So yeah,
I didn't know you guys were the largest in Toronto. That's amazing. I mean, probably just a testament to just how things have grown over time. By the way, thank you for inviting me to the meetups. I know I haven't made it out to one yet. You know, us physicians with our schedules, we're not an easy bunch to track down, but I'm going to try harder. I'll make it out to one, I promise. Yeah, I look forward to it.
You're doing important work.
No
So.
worries,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah,
But
sure,
are there any
sure.
like parting words? Like if somebody, I guess, was listening to this episode and they were just like, you know what, I've wanted to get started in real estate investing, but I don't know, I just haven't really been able to put my finger down on the right way for me. Like any parting words that you want to leave people with?
For me, I always encourage people to take action because, I mean, I've been doing this for 23 years now, and I absolutely did it all wrong in the beginning, right? I had student rentals. It's not really what I wanted, but I didn't know at the time. It's led me to where I am today. But if I never started, I would have never gone through that journey. So whatever it takes to get started, to take that first jump, whatever your risk threshold is, I mean, please come talk to us. But, find that first step that works for you. Hopefully you get hooked like we did. But that's really what I would encourage. Whatever it takes to take that first step of action is really important. It doesn't have to be perfect.
My words of wisdom before we go. I came up with 3. I know you just wanted 1, but I'll do this really quickly. Number 1 is network. So real estate investing is a very, very lonely journey. It's a very lonely journey. And so what you want to do is you want to do it. You want to surround yourselves with people who are also on that same journey, on that same path, because otherwise you're just going to, like I said, holding real estate over the long term is the name of the game. And there are so many times that people, they run into the first roadblock and going, oh, this doesn't work, or this isn't for me, or whatever. And I really want to stress that other people are going through those same, other people on the same journey, and they're hitting those same roadblocks, and they're taking their lumps as well. And so having a group, having a community, and that's really what we've tried to build here at Volition, is a community to try to encourage investors to network and to support each other. And that's really what we've built with our community. So networking I think is super important. Number 2 is, I've said this before earlier, it's not about buying cheap, it's about buying smart. And it's buying smart that mitigates risk. Most people think, oh, I buy cheap. Well, if I buy something cheap, then I can only lose X minute. That's not how it works. So it's not like I go to Vegas and I have $100 and I put $100 down. That's all I can lose. That's not how this works. And so buying cheap It doesn't necessarily mitigate risk, but buying smart does. And investing properly in Toronto is like buying a blue chip stock, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I just want to leave your audience with, specifically being a bunch of medical professionals. As a medical professional, you earn probably within a professional medical corporation,
Mm-hmm.
professional dental corporation, whatever, something of that sort. And you have an advantage that not everyone else has, in that you earn within a corporation. And if you earn within a corporation, if you took that out, you're going to be taxed at the highest possible tax bracket. 53, I just looked it up, 53.53% on the personal side. The small business taxation rate is 12.2%. And if you can leave those funds within a corporation and invest within a corporate structure, you cannot invest within your professional medical corporation, but you can still invest within a corporate structure and leave the funds within a corporate structure, right? In an associated separate corporation. A loan to that corporation means that you're not taking it out personally to invest, which means your buying power is 40% higher. And if your starting point is 40% higher, you're going to accelerate to your goals a hell of a lot faster.
No, great messages, guys. Again, thank you so much for giving up your time and educating us. And I think kind of taking real estate investing one step further, because you talked about things that I had not heard about. I think given that traditional teaching has always emphasized cash flow. So a lot of new concepts today, guys. Really appreciate your time, okay?
Well, thanks for having us. I know you only said 45 minutes, but this has been it's a little bit
all good.
longer.
Okay, guys, have a great one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. I think there were a few key take-home points for me that really stood out in this one. The first one was risk mitigation through focusing on the right tenant profile. And the second key point was playing the long game in real estate, letting time do its thing, hitting 50% loan to value, and then maybe giving some consideration to paying down properties for more meaningful cash flow down the road. Those 2 points really stood out for me. And if you guys are interested in learning more about Volition Properties and what Matt and Ming and their investing community, what they do, they have a meetup coming up next week, Tuesday, October the 29th, and I will have a link to that in the show notes. As always, everyone, thank you so much for the support and tuning in again. I'll see you in a few weeks. Until then, stay well, stay savvy.